Hey, what's up? Your VP right here, David Morales. Okay, so I want to talk today a little bit about, I want to hear some reactions, hopefully. It's going to start as a discussion, but I assume that somebody's eventually going to have a different view, and this may turn into a debate. So I want to discuss today a little bit about free will, determinism, compatibilism, and a new idea, hopefully an original idea, I want to put forth. Um, However, I'm a little bit of in a cripple doing this because I don't exactly know if my point is original. Something of a Herbert Spencer where, you think that you're putting forth something original when it may as well, might already, it's probably been acknowledged by some other philosophers and some other written texts that I have never picked up. Okay, that being said, quick sketch, free will can be interpreted many ways. In the Stoic sense, as Mr. Preston already kind of acknowledged, it's more of like, I kind of like the analogy he draws where there's sort of, somebody's chained by the neck, as it were, and they're just kind of riding the lines. They're walking with the person holding the chain, and even if they chose to look back and to move aside, they really couldn't because the chain was pulling them inevitably in one direction, so they accepted that. That's one version of free will. I'm sure there's many more, but another version of free will I really want to get to, and please correct me if I misrepresented that view. The view I want to get to is the more, I suppose, popular view nowadays, which is really about the volition that somebody may think they have, the will to choose otherwise, the choice, basically. Do we have choice? Does choice truly exist? Right now, I could wave at you, but does this wave constitute something that I chose to do in explaining an example of showing my hand wave? Or is it something merely that is not? That is simply the reaction of, brain neurons firing and the cause and effect of a chain regressing backwards in time that inevitably ended up with me doing this motion. Now, I haven't really chose a stance, but I find this new perspective I'm going to put forth called free-determinism. Hopefully that's not a little misleading, but I'm going to call it free-determinism, and I'll explain the perspective after I sketch the other two. Okay, so determinism now is, in a strict sense, and I'm sure there might be other versions of this too. Determinism is simply the belief that everything is the way it is, and it goes through this sequence of causation, cause and effect, action and reaction, and there is really no such thing as will in this sense. There is no such thing as freedom or ability to choose otherwise. That doesn't exist in a deterministic perspective, as I'm elucidating about. Now, granted, the desire is an interesting focal point to kind of rest this discussion on right now, because desire seems to be an act of volition as well. It seems to be an act of, I get to choose to act on my desire, to not act on my desire. If I see a lollipop in front of me or a really hot hooker in front of me, whatever, I mean, I could choose to indulge, or I could choose to restrain. Now, is that the case? In a deterministic perspective, even if that was the case, that I was taunted with, as it were, a sort of desire, nonetheless, the determinist would say that that desire is not exactly the act of a freedom of choice. Even at that very internal point, that is still causation working at its prime. That's a very primitive form of causation working back in your subconscious. That it's already determining the events that you're going to choose. Okay, in that sense, that's what I think a determinist is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, or maybe adjust it, as it were. The compatibilist, from my understanding of it, is a perspective that tries to adopt and reconcile the two. Some were trying to meet a middle ground of free will and in free will in the popular sense, and determinism in the strict sense. Trying to meet somewhere in the middle ground. And the middle ground would be something like, well, if a huge asteroid came from outer space and somewhat, you know, just demolished my house, and all of a sudden I'm left here with the Creator miraculously not harming me, but making me pinned to the ground, as it were, somehow. And even if I wanted to move myself out of that asteroid or that huge rock, that meteor, really, I would will to. With all my might, I would want to get out. I would want to leave, you know, that pretty much enjailment I've been put into, but I can't. So the compatibilist would say something like that, that we have the ability to choose even if we cannot, in that sense. There's internal and external factors from what I understand. The internal ones would be something like this, like the asteroid case, where you will to do something even in that situation. And then the external factor would be something like the asteroid that doesn't allow you to do anything. Let me restate that. The asteroid is the external factor. The internal factor is your actual ability to choose. So, external factor, asteroid hits you, makes you stuck. You're still alive, but while you're alive, even though you can't move, you cannot move, you still will to move. And that will still constitutes freedom, in that sense. Correct me if I'm wrong on this perspective as well. Now, lastly, what I want to do is elucidate a bit further about my own, hopefully original, I don't know, perspective of perhaps a new kind of perspective about this whole spiel. Okay, so I coin it free determinism until proven that it's unoriginal or otherwise. And that is that even if you are a determinist, you are still able to live as if free will persists in the strict sense, in the popular sense of free will. That I am still able to choose in this illusion of free will, as it were, because the illusion of free will is still very much a real part of this, you know, reality that I'm experiencing. The fact that it feels that I'm compelled to think that I'm able to choose, that able to have freedom, is perhaps much a reason to think that this illusion has some realness or some real apparatus to it. Granted that the internal belief of this determinist is still that, you know, cause and effect, there is no real freedom. However, you still adopt the view that while you understand there's some truth, and I feel sketchy when I say truth, but there is something about this illusion, some compelling notion behind it. We act as though we can still govern laws sensibly, and we can still rationally put together, you know, ethical grounds and bases for how we construe, you know, moral facts and moral guidelines and things. And simply put, that's the deterministic, that's the free will deterministic perspective. Free deterministic perspective, excuse me. And yeah, let me know what you think about that.